Hey friends, it's Anna. Happy almost July. Today we're going to be setting up my bullet journal with a super easy art theme, but I still love how it looks. And we're also going to be playing around a lot with some new spread layouts, so we'll see how that goes. I just started a new journal. This is from Vivid Scribbles, and the color doesn't come through that well on camera, but this is a really dark blue with kind of a metallic sheen and embossed floral design. I've never used this brand of journal before, so I'm excited to test it out. Grab some tea or coffee, get cozy, and let's get ready for July. I'm starting off with my cover page on this right side. I'm writing the title with my Tombow Fudenosuke brush pen, but don't get too attached to this title because I am going to be changing it in a little bit. I was kind of all over the place with this cover page, so you'll see me altering a few things throughout the process, but on the bright side, this setup will contain plenty of tricks for fixing mistakes in your journal. As you can see, I chose dandelions as my theme for this month. There's just something whimsical and charming about these flowers to me. Maybe it's because I have fond memories of being a kid and making wishes, then blowing on the white fuzz to see it fly off in the wind, thinking my wish was gonna come true. So I am drawing these dandelions in their seeding form with the white fuzz, not when they're yellow with the petals. It probably took me longer than it should have to know that these were one and the same and not two different types of flowers. The other thing I love about this theme is that these are ridiculously easy and fast to draw, so if you're a beginner artist or just like simpler setups, I think you'll love this theme. I start off with a circle in the center and then draw some loose, randomly placed stems sprouting out. The more random the better, I think, because that makes it look more natural, and I'm alternating the lengths as well. At the tip of each of these seed stems, I draw a few more lines for the fluffy top. After that base is drawn, I'm going to add just a few more details to kind of elevate this drawing. I'm adding a few thicker and shorter lines stemming from the center, and then also going over the base of each seed stem to make it a little thicker where it connects. I'm adding some dots at the tip of each seed stem because I believe that's where the actual seed is. Then I'm adding a bunch of dots for the center, just a few in the very middle and more concentrated towards the edges, so there's a little ombre of going from light to darker. Of course, we also have to draw some loose seeds drifting away. I draw these the exact same way with the fluffy tops and a thicker section at the base. I know that dandelions in this form are white, so it would have made sense to use gray to color these in, but I tend to prefer warmer tones over cooler tones in my journal, so I decided to use various shades of beige. I'm using some Tombow brush pens for this, a lighter beige for the seed stems, and then a slightly darker tone for the center and stem, and also the little thicker parts at the base of the seeds. This does turn out looking very subtle and maybe not realistic as an actual dandelion with the color shift, but I love using muted and earthy colors in my journal, and I kind of like an understated look to my art because when we get to other spreads, I don't like the art to distract too much from the functional spaces. I am going to bring in a splash of color with this light blue though, which I'll use for the titles and borders and things like that. This is an Hoo Hoo brush pen, and I'm using the fine tip side to draw a thin border around this whole design. This is one of those times where you'll see me go back and redo something. I felt this border needed to be a little taller, so I'm using my white gel pen to cover up the top and bottom line. And when I redraw those, I'll also round the corners. This white gel pen is one of my favorite tools for covering smaller mistakes. To finish off this design, at least before we also fix the title, I'm going to add some washi tapes. I'm using 2 white and cream color tapes from my grid set and this skinny blue tape with circles from my minimalist set. I'll link these tapes below in the description box along with all the supplies I'm using in this video and the color numbers for the brush pens as always. Something about this design still felt off to me, and I decided it was because the title was too big and awkwardly spaced. So I cut out part of a page from the back of this journal. I'm going to paste that in to cover up the whole original July and rewrite it. I did a smaller font and slightly different calligraphy style this time, and I think that looks a lot better. We're going to do a very simple quote page on this left side. I chose a quote from Little Woman, which I read back in April. It's now one of my favorite books ever. I would highly recommend it if you haven't read it yet. But the quote goes, "The humblest of tasks gets beautified when loving hands do them." In the context of the book, I think this quote was mainly aimed at having a more graceful attitude towards chores and everyday tasks, and how even those seemingly mundane to-dos can bring joy and meaning if you're approaching them in the right way, which I think is a lovely and very helpful sentiment. I wanted to write it here because recently I've been thinking about this quote in the context of my art. I fall into these traps of perfectionism, as was probably evident by the cover page, where I get so caught up in the outcome that creating art or making my journal spreads, for instance, becomes very stressful, and I lose the joy of the artistic process, especially when sharing my journal online. I'm putting this quote here to remind myself that this task of making art and even how I share that art online is going to be so much more beautiful for myself and others if I do it with loving hands. Hopefully that made sense and wasn't too cheesy. To go along with the quote in the middle, I drew a single dandelion with several seeds. I think I'm gonna start calling them wisps actually. That sounds a little more magical. Several wisps flowing off in a line across the page. I really like this minimal design. I feel like all the negative space actually makes it pop even more. Now getting into our functional spreads for the month, these next two pages will be my July calendar. I'm writing the title on the side because the calendar is going to take up most of this space. If you've been following along with me, you might be surprised that I'm doing a calendar spread because for the past few months I've been using a monthly log. I was using this format based on writer Carol's original bullet journal method, and I was actually really liking that log format a lot. I have a few reasons for switching back to a calendar for July though. First, I wanted to trial using this space for my content calendar as well as personal calendar. Secondly, July is going to be a crazy month of traveling and big things happening, so I wanted to easily see what days I'd be out of town, how busy each week was, things like that, and it's just easier for me to visualize in a box calendar. I don't know if I'm going to stick with the calendar or go back to the log format next month, we'll just have to see, but for July specifically, I knew this would be the most helpful layout for me. Each square of this calendar is 6 by 6, and as you can see, I labeled the dates and did the days of the week up top with my stamp set. I'm also adding a key because, like I said, I have a lot of travel going on, and I also wanted to start putting my content on this monthly calendar to see how that goes. I'm using the fine liner tip of this light blue to further split each box into two sections. The top section will be for personal events, and then the bottom section will be for content. I have no idea if this is going to be enough space, but one thing I've realized recently in my journal is that I think it's most helpful for me if I can keep everything in as few spreads as possible, if that makes sense. Like for example, in my last journal, I had a content calendar spread at the very beginning of the journal, and whenever I was planning my calendar and looking at my monthly and weekly spreads, I was constantly flipping back to that content calendar. So I think it would just be easier if I could have it all in one place and minimize the flipping back and forth. This is my first attempt at doing that, so I will be sure to report back next month on how it goes. I know that not all of you are needing to plan content as well, but I feel like this is kind of a good question for any project-based work where you constantly have to keep track of a lot of little deadlines. Also, if you are a content creator or just a person with that type of project-based work and you have a really good system of keeping track of it in your journal, please let me know. I would love to hear your ideas. To decorate this spread, I'm drawing 2 more dandelions in the bottom area here with some little wisps flowing off to the side. That's honestly one of my favorite things about this theme is the little seed stems are so perfect for filling the space in whatever way you want. If I want the composition to trail off to the left, it's so easy to do that, so it helps make the page design easier. We're going to add the color and then also fill in some of the extra space with some washi tape, and that will be my calendar spread. These next few pages are for a few different sections. We're going to have some habit trackers, my monthly task list, and a spread for moving. And I apologize, I either forgot to film or lost the clip of me writing all the titles, so we're jumping straight into this dandelion drawing on the left page. I mentioned that there was a lot of things happening in July, and that's because my husband and I are moving, so this whole page is a spread dedicated to that. All the empty space aside from this dandelion drawing is going to be for me to write down any to-dos, notes, whatever I need to keep organized with the move. This, of course, isn't a spread I normally have in my monthly setup, but this July has really been super individualized to fit my specific needs this month. And that's really one of my favorite things about bullet journaling. You can customize it fully to fit whatever you personally need. I'm finishing off this spread with a second dandelion, and then I'll also draw some wisps floating off to the side. I'm going to add some washi tape at the end, but for now we're moving on to the right page where I'm going to have some habit trackers at the top. I haven't done habit trackers in the past few months, but I wanted to include a few key ones for July. Even though this month is going to be crazy busy, I really want to avoid losing the routines that are important to me. That's where the habit trackers come in as a reminder and motivator to stay on top of these things. I'm tracking 4 habits and drawing a mini calendar for each. I created a top row so I can write the days of the week, and then for each day that I complete that habit, I'll draw a little X in the respective box. I'm writing the habits up top and then using the blue to cross off the days that aren't part of July. Lastly, I'm highlighting each habit title, and that's it for this little tracker section. The space on the right will be for another little drawing, but first we're going to finish up the tasks area below. This is pretty self-explanatory, just a space where I can write any to-dos I have for July. To further kind of designate this space, I'm using the fine tip of the blue to draw a grid encompassing the area, which was actually very difficult because I had just broke the tip of the pen. I think when I was putting the cap back on, I can still kind of get ink out of it, but I'm really sad because I use this blue all the time. I love really desaturated hues like this for my journal because you can use them for grids and highlights without it being too overpowering. Anyways, I added some wisps to the right of the trackers, and we're going to finish off these spreads with some washi tape. Moving on to the last spread of this setup, which will be my first weekly for July. For the title, I'm writing the number of the week we're on in the top right, and because I was all over the place with these pages, of course I decided I didn't like how my calligraphy looked and rewrote it. We are on week 27, almost exactly halfway through 2024, which is crazy. Underneath the title, I'm going to put a mini calendar of July, and the blue highlights the days of the week as well as the week we're on for this spread. Next to the calendar, I'm going to add some decoration with another dandelion. I've been using this specific weekly format, which will take up both of these 2 pages for the past few months, and it's working really well for me. I think it saves a ton of space in my journal because it's very space efficient. It's a format I came up with loosely based on Ryder Carroll's original method because I read his book earlier this year. He doesn't really have weeklies, but just daily logs that he creates the day of. So what I do is I'm drawing a big border around all the space in these 2 pages, and all that area will be for my dailies. I don't label them until the day of, but when it's the start of the day, I'll make my title and then use as much space as I need for tasks, events, notes, so on. Then the next day, I come back to my journal and start a new daily right where I left off. I'll put up a picture of one of my spreads from last month so you can see what I mean. I write in 2 columns on each page and do my daily headers with my alphabet stamp set, and usually do a little color highlight as well. So far, 2 pages has always been enough space for me, and you can probably see also why this is very space efficient. You never know how many lines you're going to write for each day, so this system allows me to use however much or little the day calls for. I also have a little task list in the bottom right for weekly to-dos. I'm finishing up the spread with another dandelion in the opposite corner of the first, and I'm adding some wisps in the other corners as well. And now that we're finishing up with the color, that is my completed July setup. We'll do a final flip through in a second to see all the pages together. I changed up a lot of things with this setup, but I'm hoping it will perfectly suit what I need for July. I hope you enjoyed journaling with me and this dandelion theme, which was ridiculously simple to draw, but I love how it turned out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'm wishing you a beautiful start to the new month.